Testing. Does that hold on here? Testing now. Can everybody hear me?
Well, you don't want to be talking
Yeah.
to it.
Test, test. Sound good? Can you hear me? Yeah?
Yeah, just
Decent?
talk. Just talk.
I've got a softer voice.
Good?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah?
You good?
All right.
Okay, Laura, you're good.
All right. So everybody's favorite topic. And if anybody's squeamish, I'm going to warn you right now, there are pictures of dead rats. So if you're squeamish, that you might want to step out for a couple minutes. Or step out entirely because they will pop up over and over again. So my name is Laura Mikulski. The reason I'm out here is because I was part of a group that started a grassroots initiative within Ferndale. And we started that back in 2016. It's 1,300 members strong. We go around the city and kill rats, kind of as a hobby, kind of for fun, as well as for public health reasons. So why did I get involved? The real long and short of it is I got involved personally when I saw that my neighbor had rats. And unfortunately, in my neighborhood, people were using poison. So we had a family of little screech owls, and I saw the family slowly die over time because the little owls, which you see over on the right-hand side, the little owls were being fed by the adult, and they were being fed poisoned rats. So it's, when we talk about rat control, when we talk about rat prevention, there's a human and humane element to it that I will go pretty in-depth into. But also, when you see a picture like the one with the rats on the stump, a little perspective about who I am and why I'm involved in this. My poor husband had to endure me showing that picture to people every time we went out to an event, anytime we were out at a PR event for cars or whatever. I would trot out this picture of 7 dead rats because I wanted people to know it's an issue. It's an issue for people, even if you have a clean yard, even if you don't have the rats in your yard. Sometimes there are rats nearby. We just don't see them. And when you don't see them, usually you're not out at night. Rats are out at night. And they could be walking through your yard, and it's very easy to get rid of them if you know they're there and if you know what to look for. So that said, I'm going to talk about rat facts mainly because if you understand what the motivation is behind a rat, and I say motivation like they're actors, right? But they're not. They're animals. They're animals, and they have 2 motivations, food and shelter. And once you understand some of what these rats are on about, you'll understand why they're coming into your yard, why they're in your neighborhoods, and what you can do about it. So, number 1, the rats we have, they're Norway rats. They're the big brown rats. They're ugly. They're horrendous. They're non-native. They're actually an invasive species in Michigan. And they are literally worldwide except for one location in the world. Believe it or not, there's one place where there aren't these rats, and it's not the Antarctic, it's somewhere in Canada, and it's because they had a coordinated effort to get rid of the rats and keep them out of their state. They basically are not forest animals. They're animals that live amongst humans. You don't find them in the woods. You find them around all the good stuff that they want to eat. So they like our food, they like our shelter. These animals want to be near us. They don't have fear of humans. They don't have fear of most of the human things that we have, like our cars and our pets. You would like to believe that if you have a dog out in the backyard, you're not going to have rats. It's not the case. Same thing with cats. They're familiar with all of it. They don't mind our human smells and they don't mind our pet smells because all of those things are things that mean food's nearby and so is shelter. So once again, just to clarify, the Norway rat, 13 to 18 inches long. So if you see a little brown thing run through your backyard, most of the time it's going to be a Norway rat. It's not going to be a house mouse because you just can't see the house mouse. it's too small in comparison to these giant rats that run around in our neighborhoods. They're heavy, they're grizzled, they've got a blunt nose, and once you see one, it's indistinguishable. Like you'll always see this sort of animal. So just a little bit more about rats before we go on to some of the real interesting things here. Rats, their body length, 7 to 9 inches. The tail is basically about the same size. So again, if you find an animal in your backyard and you think maybe it's a rat, maybe it's a mouse, it's real easy to tell. Look for that big long tail in comparison to the body size. It's about the same size. They prefer to burrow, so people have a lot of fears about rats getting into their attic, into various living spaces. Norway rats want to dig in the ground, and once you understand that, it's very easy to spot where they're probably living. They are always looking for shelter up above their burrow, and they dig down into the ground so that no predators can get them from above. Their average lifespan is under a year. Most of them die. They're prey animals, so even though they're nasty, even though they're almost indestructible in some ways, most of them die before a year. The ones that survive their first year, those are the real rats that most people encounter that they worry about because they seem smarter. They are usually very neophobic. All rats are neophobic, but our young juvenile rats, a lot of times will go for things like our poison bait. They'll see the poison bait, they're not as scared of it because they haven't learned to be scared of it. So the ones that are big and look threatening and look grizzled, those are the ones that are going to avoid all these poisons, and those are the ones that will use smarter techniques to actually destroy. So wild rats live in colonies more often than not. Sometimes they live alone, but a safe estimate is when you see rat holes in your yard, for every 3 holes, you can estimate about 7 rats. So they live in social groups. They're usually matriarchal, and most of the time they're in that nice little nest chamber down below the ground, having their babies separate in a little nest chamber down below as well, just like this diorama here. They have litters of 6 to 10 after a gestation period of 3 weeks. They're weaned at 20 days and can breed at 3 to 4 months. So the reproduction rate on rats is astounding. It's through the roof. Most male rats, the rats that you usually see out and about, they're usually male, they're usually juvenile, they're looking for a home. So that's sort of the gist of what we're looking at as far as behavior of the rats. And just to sort of drive it home, the breeding population can expand so rapidly, and the reason that I sort of harp on the month of September, which we're in right now, is because if you take 2 rats in December, and those rats have 10 babies, hypothetically, and this is assuming that there's no deaths, no predation, no nothing, those babies and the adults make up 12 rats. Those 12 rats can have 60 babies. Those 60 babies added to the 12 can turn into 72 breeding age rats. 72 breeding age rats can turn into 360 rats. 360 plus the 72, now you have 432 rats that can give you 2,160 babies. And that is in a short time period. September is peak season, period. So right now, we usually see the vast majority of our rat complaints at a city level. And that's just because all the babies have had babies, and now you're seeing those babies trying to establish themselves in the neighborhood prior to winter. We're lucky every time that I see a snow and a horrendous cold winter. I personally hate it, but I love it because they're going to die. So even though they live underground, a lot of them will end up succumbing to our winter weather. So it reduces the population a little bit over the winter, so long as they are outside of your house, not inside your house, not inside your garage. They will die in that cold. Travel and food behavior. Wild rats travel 50 to 300 feet from their nest to look for food and water and patrol their territory. So again, if you're seeing rats, you might have the burrow in your yard, or they might be walking through your yard to a neighbor's yard to look for food and water. And knowing that, you can sort of plan ahead of time to attack their pathway as they're going to their food and water source. They're primarily nocturnal, so all the individuals who have promoted campaigns with hawks in the cities and things like that, like St. Clair Shores did, a lot of times that doesn't have the impact that they were looking for. The hawk campaign, where they brought in hawks to predate the rats, did virtually nothing because the only rats that were out were the young juvenile rats who weren't even of breeding age. So we need to get the rats at night. That's when they're active. During the day, they're in their burrows. There's a real easy way to get them while they're in their burrows, and that'll be something that we cover in just a couple moments here. Rats will eat almost anything, just as a heads up in case you didn't know. Some of the things that they love are trash, birdseed, dog waste, dropped fruit, small animals, bird eggs, bugs, greenery, and vegetables and fruit in the garden. Some of the things that we've seen that draw the most rats are your mulberry trees. I personally love the mulberry trees because I love all of our native bird populations that feed on them. But if I had to pinpoint a number one reason that rats end up in somebody's backyard, it's because of the mulberry trees. They typically go there in the spring when the trees are fruiting and the fruit drops to the ground. So real easy strategy is get rid of some of these food sources from your yard, and you won't have the rats hanging out in your yard. Scent is their primary driver. Rats, they have very limited eyesight. They move around kind of like a cat at night. They use their whiskers to feel around, and they use their nose to figure out where they need to go. As they walk, they leave a urine trail behind, and that urine trail is something that they smell, they walk, follow that same path over and over again to the point that it becomes muscle memory. So they use their nose to scent their trail, and they use that muscle memory to walk the same path every single night. They're not moving beyond that path more often than not. So why do we care about rats, besides any heebie-jeebies that anybody has? Well, wild rats carry more than 40 harmful diseases. The big one that we usually care about in cities, if you have a dog, is leptospirosis, the spirochete bacteria that drops from the rat urine. And again, rats are walking around and peeing all the time. That spirochete bacteria, when your dog goes out in the morning and there's dew on the grass, they walk through it, they get it on their paws, they can lick their paws, and now they're sick. So it's important to get your dog vaccinated against leptospirosis, as well as wipe their paws off. And if your kids are going outside, don't let them play in the morning dew if you suspect that you have rats in the backyard. Because rats' teeth constantly grow, they must chew. Something that people are very concerned about now is if you have a new car and you have soy-covered wires, which most new cars have, they will chew on your wires. There's a certain scent to the soy covering that will draw the rats to it. They'll chew. They won't get nutrition out of it, but they will chew it as a novel thing to chew because their teeth are growing. So if you do have a car built within, let's say, the past 5 years, look into getting a wrap around your wires. Most automotive centers will be able to do it for you. And that wrap negates that smell on the wires, so the rats are less likely to chew through them. And last but not least, in the US, about 14,000 people annually report direct attacks from rats. The reason that I like to bring that up is because we like to think it doesn't happen, but on the Warren Forum on Facebook, probably about 3 weeks ago, there was a nice young lady who took her trash out, got bit on the foot by a rat. She didn't corner it, she didn't do anything to it, she just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and the rat bit her. She ended up in the hospital for an extended stay due to the fact that she had rat bite fever. So it's very important to stay on top of it. Don't consider it an issue that you can't attack, because as long as you stay on top of it, you won't have these issues. You won't have the potential bacteria and rat bite attacks. Signs of rats. So remember your rat facts real quick, just to sort of go over that one more time. They have an excellent sense of smell, and they're incontinent. So what does that tell us? They're going to be walking the same path over and over and over again. And I'll show you an example of what to look for to see if they're walking through your yard. Because they have poor eyesight, they're also going to stay along the edges of things. So that's where we're going to look to see if we can find them. And because they need to chew, we're going to look for those spots where they might be chewing, because once you find all these three, it's very easy to eliminate them. One last thing, you can find them sometimes by droppings. The droppings are pretty easy to tell the difference of mice droppings versus rat droppings. Mice droppings are teeny tiny, almost impossible to see. Rat droppings, big, blunt, a little bit bigger than a piece of rice. So if you find that sort of thing in your backyard, more often than not, it's not your rabbits, it's not squirrels, it is rats. So if you see that somewhere in a garage or a shed or in your yard, you know you have rats, and now you can look for all the rest of it. So the stink highway, it's my favorite topic. So as I was talking about, the urine that rats leave behind leaves a scent trail. So one of the easiest things to do inside is get a little black light. Very simple, very cheap. You can get it on Amazon for about maybe under $5. And if you suspect that they're in your garage or in a shed, walk along the edges and look for something to light up the way that that's lit up on the left-hand side, because urine will light up kind of a light blue. Also, because they walk that same path over and over again, you can see this is an instance where a rat did climb and they got into an attic space and they were staying up there and just using it as a place to eat from time to time. They walked that same path over and over again to the point that they left behind a urine trail and a feces trail, and they actually pushed down the insulation. So these are very obvious, but things that are a little bit less obvious include rub marks. So rats, because they burrow in the ground and because they have sort of a greasy coat, they can leave rub marks along the edges of things that they're traveling along. So for instance, some rat was walking along the conduit in somebody's house and left a little rub mark as it was going underneath the conduit and back up onto it, and then down below one more time on the far left-hand side. Up above, that was a rat that had burrowed down below and walked up above and left behind a sort of dirt trail. So if you're seeing things like this, where you see grease marks on walls, on your garage, on garage doors, anything like that, as well as getting into small holes along things, like the bottom right-hand picture, if you see anything like that, it's very clear evidence that that's a rat. Most animals won't leave things behind like that. Sorry. Last but not least, we're going to look for burrows. And the reason we look for burrows is because that's their home base. What do rats want? They want food, they want shelter. If you see 3 holes, it's clear that it's a rat. And the reason that we look for 3 holes is because one hole is a main entrance and exit, and in the case of this diorama, the general setup would be, this is our main entrance and exit. These would be our 2 escape holes. The escape holes usually go down at a slight angle. The main entrance and exit goes down at a very steep angle. And the way to tell the difference between a rat hole and a chipmunk hole is to tell that to see the 3 holes usually means that it's a rat, versus a chipmunk where there's usually 1 hole, maybe 2, usually not 3. Chipmunk holes usually go straight down as well. And so in these cases, if you're looking around things like edges of fencing, things like your tree root systems, if you see anything like that, that's a rat, hands down, easy to identify. Again, to drive the point home, your chipmunks leave a very distinct hole. It's going to be about the size of a quarter. Usually it's in the middle of a yard. So Rats would be along the fence line or along the edge of a garage. The holes are a lot sloppier. They go in an angle versus going in straight down. So if you get confused, if you take a stick and put it into the hole, nothing's going to jump out at you. It's spooky the first time you do it. But if you take a stick and put it into the hole, if it lays on its side immediately, it's a rat hole. If it goes straight down, it's usually a chipmunk hole. Last but not least, don't kill all of our native wildlife as you're trying to get rid of the rats. So because I'm involved in this since 2016, I've gotten every call in the book, and usually around springtime we get calls that people have found rats in their garden bed. Usually what that is rabbits. So we like to think of rabbits as burrowing in the ground because we're all used to the cartoons where Bugs Bunny burrows in the ground. They don't do that. They actually live in holes left by other animals, and they nest in a shallow divot, and their babies, as you can see, rabbits are on the top, rats are on the bottom. They look very similar when they're babies. So if you happen to see some little gray-bodied animals in your garden bed, it's probably bunnies. It's usually not rats unless you had to dig them up. If you dug them up, might be rats. Chew marks. If you're looking, again, for evidence of rats in your home or your garage, look around pipes, especially if you have a crawl space. If you have a crawl space, you have my deepest sympathies because that's the number one thing that I see rats in. And again, you're going to want to look around any pipe leading up into your house. If you see gnaw marks along that pipe, now you know that there's a rat there, and you can address that spot so as to exclude the rat. Likewise with siding or edges around gutter systems where rats could crawl up your gutter and get near your roof line. They tend to chew around that, as well as the lip of your garbage can. So those are very easy to spot. Also check your wires, even in your house, even in your garage, because again, there's a scent there. They like to chew it. Rat tracks. So my favorite thing around Ferndale and pretty much every city that I go to is to look for rat tracks. Once you see them, you will never unsee them. And the first snow of the year, you will always see the rats moving through your snow. So for me, the first snow of the year is a celebration because that means that I can kill all the rats that I see because now I know exactly where they walk. But in the summer, it's a little bit more difficult. So in this case, this was near a local business in Ferndale, and the rats had walked a path so frequently that they ended up leaving a little trail behind in the grass. So if you see something like that and it's thin, then it's typically a rat. And once you spot that, you know that that muscle memory is in action. You know that they're following their scent trail. So it's dead simple to put out a trap and catch a rat in that trail. How to prevent rats, everybody's favorite topic besides killing rats. Don't feed them. It's pretty simple. Again, they're animals. They're as spooky as they may be because we're not used to seeing them. They're still animals. They want two things. They want food and they want shelter. And if you get rid of the food, then they have less inclination to be anywhere near your property. Again, the number one source that I've seen with the rats, particularly in the springtime, is mulberries. And if you have any ornamental fruit trees, any sort of fruiting thing in your backyard, my best advice to you is sweep it up. Sweep it up every single day, get a tarp, do what you do with leaves in the fall, and take a push broom, push it into the tarp, bag it up, and throw it away in a rat-proof container. If you do that, you're removing the vast majority of food, although they will climb up your tree and they will eat the fruit on the tree as well. If you have a bird feeder, I recommend going to Wild Wings on Woodward or any of the other Wild Wings resources. They have bird feeders that catch the bird seed so that the bird seed doesn't go down to the ground. Apparently, according to believe it or not, there is a rodentologist in the US. He has a PhD in rodentology, and he's the one that I tend to work with. And apparently bird seed, the cheap seed, the very, very cheap stuff, is the most fragrant and will attract the most rats. So if you are feeding the birds, You can either stop, and I personally don't, I continue feeding the birds, or you have to make sure that you remove that source of food, take the bird seed in at night, sweep up the bird seed that gets down on the ground. And if you have a bird feeder, if you put it over concrete, it makes it that much easier to get all of that waste up. Also, pick up dog waste. If your dogs are anything like mine, they get the fancy pants grain-free dog food, which is giving them very nutrient-dense waste on a daily basis. If you don't pick it up, it's a smorgasbord for the rats. So pick up your dog waste and you'll be better off. Don't provide safe space. So again, they want food, they want shelter. A lot of us have these kinds of bushes. They're the sort of yew bush, juniper bush. Trim them up as high as you see fit. If you trim it all the way up so that there's nothing down low, what do rats do? They walk around edges and they walk underneath things. So if they see something like that, there's a lot less chance that they're going to build a burrow under there or walk under there and feel safe, because that's exposed. Any predator can see them, any person can see them, and it's no longer a safe space for them. Seal up openings around your house, especially crawl spaces. If you find any holes in your house, along vents, along crawl spaces, 1/2-inch hardware cloth is your best friend. If you take that and secure it around that hole, sometimes if there's a pipe going into your house, you can use things like steel wool. And if you're familiar with the expanding foam called Great Stuff, what we usually do is we take steel wool and Great Stuff, you spray the Great Stuff in, push the steel wool into it, and spray more Great Stuff around it. So you make a lasagna of this heavy-duty steel wool, so that when the rats try to get back in there, they try to chew through it, they hit the metal, it hurts their teeth, and they're less likely to get through there. Monitor your compost bins. If any of you, I'm an organic gardener, and I do everything wrong, literally everything wrong in my backyard. I have chickens, I have compost bins, I have fruit trees, I have dense vegetation, but I don't have rats because I'm on about checking my yard and being vigilant. But I will say, compost bins, it makes a great house for a rat, because what does compost do? It makes a warm spot. It's usually sheltered. So if you have it, check it out once in a while. Take the lid off, move things around, stir it up, and that way you're less likely to get rats in there. Last but not least, thin out any sort of ivy you have, and if you have stumps in your backyard, spend the extra money and get those stumps ground out. The reason I say that is one of the favorite things rats do is they live in tree roots. So they will burrow next to a tree, like we saw in that picture earlier of the rat burrows. They'll burrow right next to a tree and they'll use the tree as their roof. And sometimes it kills your trees. We've seen a couple oaks in Ferndale die because rats have gotten in there, chewed through the root systems, and killed the tree. If you take tree stumps out of the equation, they have less of a root system to be their roof. So get rid of those, get rid of your ivy, and now the rats have nothing that can shelter them. Common rodent entry points. Sometimes we don't think of this, but anything that's a hole about the size of a quarter is something a rat can get into. So even though they might be big and scary looking, their bodies can slide through teeny tiny spaces, again, the size of a quarter, and it's almost impossible to keep them out if you have a hole anywhere in your house or your garage. So look around your vent system for your dryers. It's a common entry point. They will go in there. Some rats end up in your dryer dead, which is a horrifying thought when you're cleaning your clothes. Look around your roof. So rats can climb, and believe it or not, they will actually go up your gutter or up your brick siding, and they will get in along your roof. So look at your chimneys, look at your roof line, look around, if you have an AC, central air, look around that pipe going into your house. Anything that you see that's a hole, fill it in, use this or use hardware cloth. If you use those two things, you can keep the rats out. Rat havens in urban settings. I just mentioned crawl spaces a little bit earlier. So when I go out to people's homes and I help them with their rat issues, the first thing that I ask them is, do you have crawl space? Because if they do, there's probably rats in it. Second thing I ask them is, do you have a deck? So if anybody here has a deck, look under your deck. It's one of the most common places for them to go, and you want to look for things like the hole that you see on the right-hand side here. So these low-lying decks that people have, they're beautiful, they're wonderful for entertaining, but they are magnificent for keeping that rat burrow nice and dry and comfortable for them. So again, the rats are looking for the things that they want. They want that safe space, they want a nice dry burrow system, and they want something that's going to protect them from predators. If you have any of these things, including the wonderful concrete porches, concrete porch steps, those are usually hollow behind there, and they like to get underneath there and make a home. So look for those things, and typically if you find these holes, you've got rats, and you can address them. One of my favorite things to do when you find those holes after you've addressed the rat issue, because we don't want to trap them in there, is trench it out, 2 feet down, 2 feet out. And you can see in this example, this is where we're talking about that hardware cloth, the 1/2-inch hardware cloth. If you take it 2 feet down and 2 feet out, then that's about as low as the rat will actually dig to get into a structure. So if you do that around your deck, if you do that around your porch, if you even do that near your crawl space entry point, then you won't get rats underneath it. So it's a very simple step. It's a little bit labor intensive because nobody likes to dig 2 feet down, 2 feet out. But if you do it, you're guaranteed not to have rats underneath those things. And that's a beautiful thing. Rat repellents. Everybody would love to believe that there's some easy solution to keep rats away, and I'm here to tell you there's not, period. All the old wives' tales, all the internet folklore that's out there about bay leaves and cat urine and mothballs and everything else, I will say mothballs, peppermint, and predator urine, not cat urine, but actual predator urine that you buy in a hunting supply store, those will work temporarily. They won't work long term. If you have food, if you have shelter, the rats will still ignore it after they realize they haven't gotten eaten, they'll move in. But all the other folklore that we've heard, all the other myths about keeping rats away, people use their hair, their pet's hair. I've heard of people peeing along the edges of their garage. I've heard every single story out there, and I've tried the vast majority of them besides peeing around my garage. I've done all of these various things. None of it works. Literally none of it works. Even the pet fur that people swear by, and they swear that my cat would kill a rat, so obviously the rat would be scared of it. I've seen rats use cat fur in their burrow for their nest. None of it works, so don't try the vast majority of these. And as a special note, those ultrasonic machines that everybody likes to try out once in a while, it's actually been shown in this picture that rats will hop up on top of it. So what do rats do when they're communicating with other rats? They're squealing in a way that's kind of ultrasonic. So they hear it, it sounds like another rat. They'll hop right up on top of it, as you see in this picture where the rat hopped up on the wall and got on top of the ultrasonic device. So number one, eliminate the scent trail. So now that you've seen all of the things that you need to look for and you know about potentially blocking them out of areas where they can make a burrow, if you get rid of that scent trail, they can't find their way back. Rats are neophobic, they're scared of new things. And what do they leave behind as they're walking every single night? They're leaving a scent trail. They've got that muscle memory. So we trap along their path because we know that that's where they're walking. And we get rid of that scent trail so that no other rats can smell it and they can't find their way back to whatever thing was attracting them in the first place. So the easiest thing to do is 1 part bleach, 10 parts water. Anytime that I've trapped rats or eliminated them within the burrow systems, I immediately follow it up with that. If I care about the plants in the area, I use 1 part bleach, 10 parts water. If I don't care about anything and I just want to clear the area as much as possible, I do a 50-50 mix. So that goes for plain dirt, concrete, anything like that. Use your 50-50 mix and you will eliminate all of the scent for a wide swath. You can pour it on, you can spray it on, whatever you feel like doing, just get it out there, because the minute you do, now they don't have that scent drawing them back to the same area over and over again. How to eliminate rats. So as a total side note before we move into this, at this point I have killed, I'll say within the past week, I've probably killed about 250 rats personally. If I count from 2016, so I'm not even going to count prior to 2016 because that was prior to when Ferndale Rat Patrol started. If I count all of that time, I've probably killed in the thousands. So it's very easy to do when you figure out all of the rest of this, all the behavior, when you know where the burrows are, when you know that they walk that same path over and over again, you can make a hobby of it like some of us weirdos have done. And you can just kill rats, as many as you have in the neighborhood, as many as you have around your home. You can kill them and get rid of them, probably indefinitely, so long as you take the following steps. Talk about it. Get in everybody's face, talk to your neighbors. Be that weirdo with a picture of 7 dead rats on your phone, show it to everybody, and let them know that this is not, it's not taboo. It doesn't mean that your yard or your house or your garage is dirty. It just means rats are very industrious, they're smart, they know where to go, they know what's safe, and they're always looking for food, and they're always looking for shelter. So it's not a terrible thing to have rats. Nobody wants it, and we should get rid of them. But it doesn't mean that you or your neighbor are a horrible person or a bad homeowner. So talk to everybody and try to do it in a gracious way, or be obnoxious about it. I'm obnoxious about it. I don't know if you can tell, but I get in everybody's face about the rats. Again, there's no stigma in it. I've seen it in every single neighborhood that I've gone to, and that includes neighborhoods in Birmingham, that includes neighborhoods in Grosse Pointe, that includes Madison Heights, Ferndale, Oak Park, you name it. If I've been there, I've found rats. So it's not isolated to one city, and it's not isolated to certain areas within the city, as we would like to think. Back when we started doing this in 2016, we actually developed an app to track all the rat sightings, all the burrow sightings, and all the rat kills. And we did that because we wanted to see if it was the downtown, because there was a suspicion that all the dumpsters, all the restaurants, all the wonderful things that draw people to Ferndale, we thought maybe that was the issue. It wasn't. Plotted it all out on a map, and it was so widespread throughout the city that it was clear. There was no central hot spot. There were hot spots as far as times of year. So when the mulberry trees started up and the rats were eating the mulberries, those became hot spots. But every other time of year, they were widespread, and there was no defining characteristic as to where the rats would be. Use an integrated pest management plan, and basically what that means is you can prevent them, as you see in this pyramid here, prevent them, use sanitary measures within your backyard and within your home and garage, but apply physical, biological, and chemical means to get rid of them. And it's dead simple to do it. I personally am not a huge fan of chemical means because I have such success with the physical means. Physical means are very quick, and I get a confirmed kill. So I tend to use that more often than not, but to each their own, and if you're going to do it, I can tell you how to do it very safely. Burrow destruction. So when I say that I killed 250 rats this week, it was because I destroy them in the burrow. So rats sleep during the day. They're in their burrow system, just like we see here. The easiest thing to do is once you find those burrows, you can use either a smoke bomb, and in this case, we use the giant destroyers, and they look like a cartoon stick of dynamite. It's very simple to use. It is the same exact composition as a normal smoke bomb that you use around 4th of July, except that it's huge. And the basics of it are that when you use this, you fill in those 2 escape holes with dirt, and you put one of these down into that main entrance with the wick down. When the wick's down like that, it creates a ball of fire, honestly, and it looks horrifying. But it fills this with smoke. The rats can't get out this way. They can't burrow out fast enough, and they can't come out this way because they're faced with a ball of fire. And once you see that billow of smoke, you can throw dirt on top of it, and you're done with the rat. So you use one of these per 3 holes, and again, very, very simple method. My favorite, though, and the one that is recommended by our leading rodentologist, the individual who designed the rat control program in New York City, Boston, Washington, D.C., and Chicago, he prefers dry ice. So dry ice, it's very easy to get, and if you're a pest control person, you can't use it, unfortunately, because once you become a licensed pest control individual, you have to use rat ice, which is EPA approved, white labeled dry ice. So they slap a label on normal dry ice and they use the same exact thing. And as a note on how successful that is, within the city of Boston, when they were using it, they saw a 90% reduction in the number of rats in the area. So it can be that successful as long as you're looking for these rat burrows, as long as you can access the rat burrows. And this is essentially how it works. So this was actually outside a business in Ferndale. On a Saturday morning, we killed probably close to 300 rats based on the volume of burrows that we had. All you do is you do it first thing in the morning, 2 pounds of dry ice per hole. You stuff it in deep into these holes, and you do it with every single hole. So dry ice there, and dry ice there. And essentially what happens when you do that is the dry ice sublimates. So dry ice turns into CO2, and when you put it in those holes and stuff it in tight and you throw dirt on top of it, the CO2 is heavier than air. It drifts down into that burrow. When it drifts down, it's replacing all that oxygen. The rats breathe it in. They go to sleep. It actually anesthetizes them. They go to sleep and they die, and they become compost underground. We don't have to worry about rat bodies. We don't have to worry about rats coming out, jumping out. We don't have to worry about anything. And they're all dead, and you have a nice little tomb. So it's by far my favorite method. It is virtually foolproof. The only real trick is you have to have gloves. Really heavy-duty gloves, not these little gloves that I bought at Meijer right before coming here. Get some heavy-duty gloves and take that dry ice from Meijer, and I'm going to show you what it looks like, just in case you've never seen dry ice. As soon as I can get these on. If you go to Meijer, it's usually in the front of the store, and it's in a cooler up at the front of the store. The cooler is a special kind of cooler because you can't keep this in your freezer, so never put it in your freezer. You'll actually destroy your freezer. Comes in a bag. It's usually in a block. So obviously it's not usable when it's in this block, and I won't do it in here because I don't want to ruin the floor. But basically what I do is I throw it down on the ground. It crumbles up into pieces, and then you can stuff it into those holes. Get yourself a shovel because you're going to be throwing dirt on top of it. Use the handle end of the shovel to stuff it deep in there. And when you do that, you're going to get 2 pounds per hole. Rats go to sleep, they die. Burrow smoke bombs, we talked about those a little bit, but one last tip that I heard from the DNR. So we had a campaign where we used these within an individual's backyard, and her backyard was basically 90% rat burrow, holes everywhere, and it didn't work. And it became a question of why didn't it work? So the real trick with this is the ground has to be moist. It's a perfect time to do it right now because the ground is moist. It's been raining, so there's enough moisture there to keep it trapped, because what happens when you use this is when you're sticking it in there, smoke goes in, but what does smoke want to do naturally? It wants to drift up. So if you have sandy soil, like we almost all do within Michigan, it can sometimes drift through the soil instead of killing the rats. So you need to have that wet soil. If you suspect that you have rats and you want to use something like this, set out a sprinkler right by the rat burrow. It won't bother them. They won't leave the burrow. If you do that, the ground will be nice and saturated, and it'll keep all that smoke down in there so that the rats end up dying. Snap traps. By far, the most success that we had when we had a campaign back in 2016 to eliminate the rats and we were tracking everything, the most successful method, the method that resulted in, I want to say it was close to 700 dead rats within a 1 month time period, was snap traps. And it was just the old-fashioned snap trap. By far the best, by far the most effective, and usually the cheapest. So if you use something like this, does anybody not know how to set a snap trap? No shame if you don't. No? Okay. So it's very, very simple to set it, and where would you want to set it? You want to set it along the edges of things and along the pathway that the rats travel on a daily basis. My mother, for instance, has arthritis in her hands. I buy her special traps because they're very easy to use. She can just push down on it instead of trying to finagle the kill bar back here. She can push down on it, and then when she is done with it, it's very easy to release. The success rate of these traps is a little bit less, and it's mainly because this is suspicious to a rat. A rat sees this, they're a little bit leery of it, it's something new in their environment, versus this, that's wood, it's a little bit more natural, and sometimes when we're placing traps around the downtown area, we cover it with dirt as well as leaves, just to camouflage it a little bit, and we'll put our bait there on top of everything, but the rest of it becomes kind of invisible to the rat, and you have great success that way. When you place it, there are a couple guidelines to making sure that it's very successful. Place it along a wall if you can. If you have that nice path that I showed you earlier, you might not be able to place it along a wall if you see that the path cuts through an area. But if there's a wall and you see that they've been walking along that wall, put your bait near the wall and your kill bar away from the wall. And if you do that with no gap, keep it as close to the wall as humanly possible, touching the wall preferably. If you do that, the rat, again, is walking along that wall, feeling it with their whiskers, kind of like a cat would. They will walk up to this, and their head is positioned exactly where it needs to be to find the bait, and exactly where it needs to be to make sure that they get killed quickly with nothing else happening, without having it just bop them a little bit or catch a foot or catch a tail. Everybody fears the worst when they put out snap traps because everybody's had a horror story pop up somewhere in their life about an animal that got caught but didn't die. So if you do it right, you'll kill the rat each and every time. And speaking from experience, I did it wrong one time. You don't want to have to go through it. It's not a fun experience to catch only part of a rat and not have it die. So do it right every single time and you'll be just fine. If you don't have a wall to place it around, real easy way to sort of mimic a wall is get a box. Just get like a cardboard box, carve 2 holes in it, make sure those holes are in the way of that path so that the rat goes in, they'll find that bait, and they'll potentially get snapped in the box. So that's a nice way to mimic that wall setup, and it protects the trap from wildlife and pets that might be walking around outside. Additionally, we have something that we kind of invented on the Ferndale Rat Patrol called the Roger box because Roger invented it. So all it is a simple ammo can from Harbor Freight. Costs about $2 to $3. He drills a hole in one end and he puts a rat trap inside of it with the bait facing towards the hole and the kill bar in the back. He also uses a metal bar underneath that rat trap to lower it in, because nobody wants to get their fingers snapped. These traps, keep your fingers away from that kill bar at all costs, because if you get your finger caught, you may break a bone. This setup has been wildly successful because it's something that you can leave out. You don't want to leave it out during the day because you can get chipmunks, so if you like the chipmunks, you don't want to kill those. You can also potentially get a bird in there if it's a small enough bird. So again, pick up your traps during the day. The rats aren't out then anyway. So this is another thing that you can just set near a wall, set near a path that directs them right into the trap so that there's no escaping that trap. They're not going to catch a foot. They're not going to catch a tail. They're only going to catch their head in this. So it's a guaranteed kill. Other safe trapping ideas. My favorite method, and this is just in my hallway at my house, is using a, what's that called, a milk crate over top of the trap. So if you have wildlife in your backyard, if you have possums and skunks and raccoons, or dogs and cats that walk through your yard and you're worried about potentially catching them, stick a milk crate over top of your trap when you figure out where you want to place it. Put a brick on top of that as well, and that way no wildlife can stick a paw in there, stick a head in there, and potentially get caught. People love the rat zapper. I have probably about 6 of them that I use around town. But with the rat zapper, it's basically a device. The rat walks in, they touch a metal plate, they get zapped, there's no escaping it. The minute that foot hits, they're dead. I love it, but you can't use it outside reliably because any of that moisture in the air can cause it to short out. So if you have a zapper, use it in garages, in houses, crawl spaces, anywhere where it's nice and dry and there's no risk of moisture. And again, this setup that I'm showing right here is an active rat burrow that we had in Ferndale. You want to place traps not right near the burrow. You want it about 2 feet away. If you take an arm, maybe an arm's length, place your trap there. Don't put it right next to the burrow. The rats are smart. If they see something next to their burrow, they avoid it in general. So keep it about arm's length away. And again, put a milk crate over it if you're concerned about wildlife. I have 2 dogs. I don't want them to get snapped in any traps when I let them out at night. So I put a milk crate over it. And I tend to double up my traps the way that you see right there. So I have 2 traps right next to each other, just in case the rat comes from the other side, just in case if that trap hits it in a way that they bounce, because sometimes that happens. If they do, they're going to bounce into another trap, and they're going to be dead. Live trapping, some people love live trapping. So the thing to know about live trapping is if you do it, you have to commit to actually killing the rats. You can't just release them in the wild. There is no rat sanctuary. I don't know of anybody who actually wants to take these rats in. So the way that works, I use the ratinator. I tend not to use this unless I can't actually physically get into the burrow or kill them with a snap trap. So usually maybe under a crawl space where I don't have much access. And the ratinator is a repeating live trap. So you catch one, and if you catch one, you're going to catch more because they hear each other, they're drawn to each other. And at one point, I caught maybe about 12 in there. It comes with its own bucket that's sized to the trap. So you fill the bucket with water, you dunk them in. It's not fun for anybody involved, particularly for the rats. But it's not fun for the humans that are bleeding hearts like myself. Even though I've killed a ton of these rats, I still don't like to hear them or see them thrash. So know if you're going to do this, they will make sounds and they will do things that indicate that they're distressed before they die. So that said, people have amazing success with it because the rats do hear each other, they're drawn to each other, and you can catch a lot of them all in one fell swoop. So keep it in mind if you have a situation where you can't get to the burrow and kill them easily, and you can't access a path to get them with a snap trap. Best practices. So people love to ask me about bait all the time, and I tend to default to saying rats like what they have access to. So in my part of Ferndale, we have very simple rats. They like peanut butter. In the northern part of Ferndale, where the homes are a little bit more expensive, they tend to like more expensive things. They have better taste up there. Typically, they like fattier foods as well as fruit, and they don't go for the peanut butter. Over near Tim Hortons, where they had a ton of rats, they wanted Timbits. We caught all the rats with Timbits. We just went in, got the Timbits, put them on the traps, and we were done with them. So if you do have rats in your area, look around the area, see what they might be interested in, and try that. And if you can't figure out what they're interested in, use peanut butter. It's cheap, it's very fragrant. And if you want to make it a little bit more fragrant, pro tip, because I've been doing this too long, pro tip is take the peanut butter, put it in a little bowl, add a tiny bit of vanilla, just a hint of vanilla, warm it up in your microwave, and smear it on. And what happens is it's so fragrant that a lot of times when it's a little bit cooler out like it is right now, that scent can carry almost a mile away to a rat. Not to me, but to a rat. And it's so effective that the most active time periods that we see rats are right when the sun goes down and right before the sun comes up. So when I do this, I typically put them down right when the sun goes down, and usually about 5 minutes later, all my traps are filled. So it can be incredibly effective. Just use the things that are very fragrant. Chocolate, Nutella. I almost got caught in a trap because of Nutella. Stinky meats, cheese, dog treats, all of those really cheap dog treats like the pepperoni and the canine carryouts and things like that that you can get for a couple dollars, and you get a whole bag of them. They're fantastic for rats because that smell carries, and it's enticing to them. Placing traps unset for a couple days. So another pro tip that we've learned over the years is if you set the traps out for 2 or 3 nights in a row with the bait, but not set, the rats get used to it because, again, rats are neophobic. They're scared of anything that's brand new. So it might take them a couple days, especially with these kinds of traps, if you don't want to risk your fingers with the old school traps. If you use something like this, set it out, smear your bait on the outside of it, because obviously this doesn't have much of a way that you can just set it and not have it be live. So set it on the outside, especially if you have peanut butter. It's very easy to just smear it on the lip of it, smear it on the edge of it, and the rats will come by, and you'll know if they came by because you'll see it all licked off every single day. 3 nights of that, and then you set the trap, and you'll have a whole bunch of dead rats to clean up in probably about 15 minutes after sundown. Also, set as many traps as you can. These are expensive. Again, I want to say this one cost about $8 at Ace. I don't love these. I love this because I can go on Amazon and get a case of about 24, and I am the sort of person that I don't care to even reuse these. They're so cheap that I just put them out, I get my 24 dead rats, I throw them all in a bag, and I get a new case of rat traps. So if I have to pick, I tend to go with something like this, and I set out as many as I think is necessary for a yard. Usually about the fewest I'll set out is 3. I would tend to set out more if there was a heavy infestation. If I saw a lot of rat movement, a lot of rat activity or signs, I would try to set out about 10 because it just ups your chances, especially if you're stacking them side by side, it ups your chances of catching a rat that night. So 2-week stats, this was from 2016. And 2016, I know you can't see the numbers down below. In 2 weeks, with just a handful of people trapping in Ferndale, we ended up with a little bit over 200 dead rats accounted for. So that was all with snap traps. It's very quick, very easy. This is actually considered to be the most humane method that is approved for pest control, because otherwise it would be dry ice would be the most humane method. So again, it's very, very possible to do this. We plotted it all on a map where we could see how many rats we were killing, what we were doing, and it was wildly successful that first year, which is why Ferndale Rat Patrol exists and why we perpetuated into 2018. Animal allies, some people like to believe in cat colonies, feral cat colonies. I will tell you that feral cats and cats in general, they will kill rats if you have a good cat. They will potentially kill rats, but they can only do so much. And if you're up against a swarm of rats, so you have 3 holes and you've got 7 rats, your cat's not going to kill all 7 in one night. You can kill all 7 in one day. So I tend not to believe in cat colonies or promote them, especially because cats are indiscriminate. They will kill pretty much anything that they can possibly get their paws on. Owls, however, if you have a nice backyard and you have some big trees, consider getting an owl box, because owls will live out there and they will catch all the small rats as they come out of the burrow. So all the juveniles, they will get. And hawks, right around now, the hawks are migrating south for the winter. So we're seeing a lot more hawks in the neighborhoods. Hawks will kill rats. However, they only kill them during the day. So they're getting the juveniles. So you have your adults you still have to deal with. So why not poison? So we have some poison here, and I will tell you there are some situations where I'll use poison. Anecdotally, there was a house that I told the people to move out of because the rats had gotten into the walls and were chewing through their electrical wires. So those 2 individuals moved out of that house they were renting. But that was one of the only cases where I recommended poison, because they were living on a crawl space. The rats were actually chewing into their cabinetry in the kitchen and going up into the walls and chewing in their wires. That one I said use poison only because they were already in the house, and that didn't pose a danger to wildlife outside, because we don't want to kill our animal allies like our owls and our hawks and all the other good critters out there. They'll eat rats. Also, come on, non-target species like your possums. Possums will actually kill rats as well. They may look like a rat, but they do actually kill the rats. All the animals that are in the neighborhoods, if you're using poison, they become at risk, because rats, again, they're going to pick up some of this poison, not this poison, this poison. They'll pick up some of this poison and they might run with it to get back to their burrow so they can stockpile. If they get scared along the way, they drop it. So now your dog's at risk. Now any other animal is at risk, and they can potentially eat it and they can die. So it's a very risky thing to do, and it's really not that successful. If you're poisoning along fence lines like most pest control individuals do, it's not very successful. The rats will walk along that fence line, they'll encounter the box. Sometimes they go in, sometimes they don't. Most of the time they don't. The smart ones avoid it, and they just go about their business to whatever safe food source they've already established. Additionally, rats are gaining immunity to some of the second-gen anticoagulant poisons. Come on. There we go. Oh, we may have died here. You guys are going to love this. I'm going to go behind here and do this. So rats are getting immunity to some of these poisons. The second-gen anticoagulant poisons actually perpetuate in the body. They bioaccumulate, which is just a fancy way of saying the poison persists in the body. Those rats that eat the poison, the anticoagulant poison, it's usually bromadiolone. You'll see it in stores all over the place. They tend to live for about 2 weeks. And during that time, they can actually have their pups, wean their pups, and persist in that cycle of rats. So I tend not to recommend that poison anymore. Additionally, I don't recommend it because you can see on the top here, bromadiolone, it will actually persist in liver tissue for 248 days, 8 months. So those pest control individuals who tend to promote it because it's a very cheap poison and it was very widely used, they tend to say that it won't kill your dogs and your cats. It's very safe, right? Now, they're not wrong, but they're being a little bit deceptive. If your dog ate a rat or ate a little bit of that poison, now it lives in their body for 8 months, period. So if it lives in their body for 8 months, that gives them plenty of chances to get a little bit more of that poison in their body. Same thing with your cats. Same thing with raccoons and possums and other wildlife. If that poison can live in their body for 8 months, there's a very high chance that those animals can end up dying from the poison, just not right away. It might be months later that now you have a dog that's sick at the vet, and you don't know why it's sick, but it was a cumulative effect of little bits of poison over time. And to belabor the point, this is just things that I've accumulated from Ferndale, from Oak Park, from wherever, where poison has killed non-target species, including barn owls. Michigan used to have barn owls. We do not have them anymore. We don't have them because we poisoned our rats. They ate our rats. There's no barn owls anymore. We can potentially get them back. They are still in Illinois. They're in neighboring states. If we actually stop using poisons on a widespread scale, or if we use smarter poison, which we will talk about. So is poison ever okay to use? Yes. One of my favorite poisons is actually right up there in that big box, the Tomcat box. So that poison is bromethylene. It's a neurotoxin. It is horribly dangerous. I can't believe that we as people can buy it, but it's very safe to use when you're using it in approved formats, and it doesn't bioaccumulate. It actually changes in their body, and through the process of changing in their body, it no longer is a poison. It just impacts their nervous system, causes them to seize, and they die within about 24 to 48 hours. So if you're going to use a poison, use bromethylene. You can get it at Home Depot, and you can look at that box and see exactly what it looks like. I tend not to go for the meal bait, even though it's very attractive to rats, only because they can carry it and they can drop it. So try to go for things that are more block format, like you see on the right-hand side and like you see down there. That they tend to eat while they're at the bait box so that they don't have that opportunity to drop it. I will say, again, with bromethylene, you have to be very safe with it. If you have dogs, go out with your dogs to make sure that they're not picking up anything from the ground, because if they ingest bromethylene, there is no antidote. Unlike the second-gen anticoagulants that they can get a vitamin K shot for, there are 0 antidotes to bromethylene, and your dog can potentially die. So just be careful with it. And when to use poison, I tend to recommend it underneath those concrete steps. So we talked about those earlier, and it's impossible to put a trap underneath them unless you want to dig down and get under there with your body, which I'm not doing, and I don't know anybody that would. So if you have to, drop some poison in there if you know that the rats are under there and if you can't access those burrow holes. Same thing with crawl spaces. If you have a crawl space and the rats are in there and you can't get a trap in there and you don't want to do live trapping and all the other options that we presented, you can use poison in there, and when all the rats are dead, seal it up. 2 feet down, 2 feet out. Is there a poison that only kills rats? The answer is no. And it's just that simple. So pest control loves to say, this is only for rats, it's not going to kill anything else, it's very safe to use. A poison is a poison. And even things that there have been a lot of talk of bloat balls, which are basically peanut butter and baking soda, those sorts of things will kill a rat. They're designed for rats, and they're designed for animals that can't burp because it causes gas to build up in their body. So that's a fantastic option unless you have a dog that likes peanut butter, and I don't know a dog that doesn't like peanut butter. Now, dogs can burp, but if they ingest enough baking soda, it actually disrupts their body chemistry to the point that they can have heart issues and breathing issues. So we tend not to recommend the bloat balls, and we tend not to recommend poison except in those rare instances where you absolutely have to use it. And does property line poison baiting work? If you have a pest control person come out and set those bait boxes around your property line, don't expect a ton of results. It just doesn't work. It's not recommended by the top rodentologist in the country, if not the world. And he tends to recommend using one bait station along a strategic pathway, because all along your yard is not necessarily where they're walking. And last but not least, I was talking about Alberta earlier when I mentioned that there was one place in the world, literally one place in the world, that doesn't have rats, is Alberta. It's glaringly obvious. You can see it over in the corner there. where it is the one place that doesn't have them. It's amazing. It's a fantastic program. They have promoted identifying rats, identifying burrows, looking for signs of rats, and killing rats. And essentially what happened is they have a team that walks the border of Alberta, and they look for rats. If they find them, they've actually been known to take down a structure and burn it and stand outside with BB guns shooting the rats as they come out, because they take it that seriously. And is that realistic for the rest of us? No. But I think the real message here is because they had such awareness of the issues of rats, the way that rats work, the signs of rats, and how to get rid of rats, that makes them successful, period. So if we can all remember what we've heard tonight, and I know it's a lot, and I've had years of dealing with rats to be able to accumulate this knowledge, but if you remember how they work and you remember what to look for, you can keep them out of your neighborhood and out of your town and potentially out of the state if you're diligent. And that's it. Does anybody have any questions? I know it was a lot of rat stuff. Yes? Yeah.
Are the three holes always close together like that?
You know, most of the time, yeah, so most of the time, if you stand like this with your arms out, if you can potentially touch each hole with your arms out, then that's the rough estimate of it. Yep. And if you don't see 3 holes, it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have rats. Sometimes there's 2 holes, sometimes there's 1 hole, sometimes there's 20 holes. So if you see the 3 in that pattern that, I forgot this stopped working. If you see the 3 in that sort of bowling ball pattern, so 2 holes and 1 hole, if you see that, hands down, that's a rat. But if you see 1 hole and the hole goes in at an angle like that, that's also a rat. And it could just be that the other holes are underneath a structure, underneath a bush, or they're hidden in such a way that you can't see them. Anything else?
If you get rid of, rats in your yard, but no one else around you is doing it, or don't they just come back later?
That's a really good point. So that goes back to that point that I said, talk about it, carry around the picture of your dead rats, and be that person who just talks to your neighbors. The reason that my neighborhood doesn't have rats, and we haven't had rats, we just had our first rat probably about a month ago, and that was, it was a shock to me because I literally have gone around to my neighbors and said, if you see these things, tell me. And I personally, since it costs more for me to deal with the damage from rats, I personally will go to their house and set a trap for them if I have to. But more often than not, if you talk to your neighbors and you're not accusing them, like let's say they have a wood pile, or they have clear evidence of like not managing their trash, if you talk to them and say, hey, I saw a rat go into your yard, could I help you get rid of it because I saw one in my yard and I got rid of mine? If you have to lie a little bit. It's fine. Get rid of the rats, period. And if you work with your neighbors, most people, I've only had one person reject me on getting rid of their rats, and that one person just rejected me because they had something in their backyard that they didn't want me to see. So that's fine. The vast majority of people are very amenable to the idea of getting rid of the rats. It's just a lot of times they don't want to take that extra step of actually doing the work. So if you're fine with helping them and thinking of it as a community project, because it really is, no house is an island. So if you do that, you can get rid of them in your neighborhood and even the surrounding area and keep them away for an extended period of time.
One last question.
Yeah.
You had that brief discussion of the woman who got bit on her foot.
Yes.
Are rats actually like normally would be just go away from you? Like if they heard a human walking toward them, usually not out.
More often than not,
Would they just
yeah.
away?
More often than not, but personal experience is if the rats have seen humans and the humans haven't done anything, then they become accustomed to us. So for instance, the woman that I spoke about, actually, did I speak about this woman? It was a single mother in Royal Oak, and she called me up one day and said, I have 30 rats in my backyard, and they're looking at me. And I was like, that's not possible, there's no way. And I went to her yard, and we were talking back there, and she's like, look in the back. And there were 30 rats back there staring at us. And I was shocked, to say the least, because most of the rats I have encountered, they'll look at me, but then they'll run. These rats were so used to that neighborhood and so used to that environment that they just sat there and looked at her. They were out in broad daylight. They had no fear of her, no fear of her child. And it took us one Saturday from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., and we got rid of all the rats in probably about a 5-house perimeter around her, just using the dry ice method. So it's, yeah, the rats, most of the time they're gonna run, but if they know you, if they know your neighborhood, they'll come right up to you. I know, it's a little bit, it gives you the heebie-jeebies to talk about the rats from time to time. I'm just so used to it now that I'm the rat lady and I joke about it and carry around the picture on my phone. Yes?
My next door neighbor is, he's got the crawl space
Mm-hmm.
and the door fell on.
Yeah.
And I said, are you going to fix that? He goes, yeah, he said, it just keeps falling down. I said, well, you're providing a condo right there.
Oh yeah. Well, and if he doesn't fix it, call code enforcement. I mean, really, I tend not to go the code enforcement route unless I have to. So you've already had that conversation with him. You might want to try one more time and say, hey, do you need some help fixing it? I can figure out a way to get it on there so that it stays. And if he's not amenable to it, call code enforcement, because that is a hazard. He can get those rats in there, and like I said, there's one time that I have used poison, and it's because the rats were so bad in this couple's house that they were renting, and they had gotten in through the crawl space. We poisoned the vast majority of them, but there were some that got up into the walls and got into their cupboards and were eating their food, got into their dryer. They were literally everywhere. They were even behind, you know how tubs and showers have the plastic that goes high up on the wall? They're even back there banging on it while they were showering. So that one I just said, move out of the house, burn it down, do something. Don't live in this house anymore and throw some poison into that crawl space. But absolutely, seal up the crawl space, and if your neighbor has an open crawl space, work with them if you can to get it closed.
Two doors down from me. My next door neighbor was talking to this guy, and he said, oh yeah, he said, we hear him crawling in the walls at night.
Yeah.
So he's got it bad, and they're
Oh, yeah.
coming into her yard, so she puts up a privacy fence, and she says, those rats are crawling under it, and I said, well, yeah, you're not gonna block them.
Especially another offender that really causes rats and creates a great habitat for them is a privacy fence against a chain link fence. It's the perfect rat highway. The minute that you see that, what does the rat do? It wants to walk in a protected space. What does it have? It's got a perfect protected space. So if that's the setup, it's, again, real easy to potentially stick a trap in there, set a trap along that fence line so that they poke their head under. You already know they're walking there. So set your traps along that, kill them where you can. And I personally, if she knows that her neighbor has an issue and the rats are getting into that person's house, that would be the sort of neighbor that I would talk to probably every day until they got sick of me, because the last thing you want is that house catching on fire because the rats chewed through the electric. So, anything else? I'm a font of knowledge with rats. I do. Yeah, everybody's got to have a hobby. So this is my hobby, and I do it for free. If you think you have rats and you're not confident in getting rid of the rats on your own, I'm not going to come out to your house every night and set traps, but I'm going to help make sure that you can either find the burrow or find the path, and you can get rid of the rats yourself.
I have no burrows in my yard.
Okay.
Neighbor next door, he caught a big rat, a really big one.
Right.
I let the dog out last night, and I turned the porch light on. There was one about this size that ran through the yard.
So you
But I
have,
no burrows.
right, so you have a colony somewhere nearby. And again, they walk 50 to 300 feet looking for food. So somewhere in that zone around you, 50 to 300 feet, is a rat colony. And you just saw a juvenile who's probably male, who's trying to find a new home to establish his colony. So if if you'd like, I can come out to your house, and I've got no shame anymore. Again, I will go house to house, talk to.
The neighbor next to me caught a big one, and the neighbor on the other side caught a big one.
Yeah,
And there was little babies, they said they couldn't hardly walk or see. The
Right.
mom, whoever it was dead in the garage. You think they probably ate some fertilizer that was open inside the garage and they killed them?
it would. It would. It absolutely would. And most rats aren't going to eat fertilizer, even though it's fragrant. It's, yeah, it could be somebody poisoning in the neighborhood, which if you have pets, keep an eye on them. But if you want me to stop out, I'm more than happy to stop out and talk to your neighbors too. So as long as we all get on board, I'll say this, this year in Ferndale, we have been, right now it's Traptoberfest. So Traptoberfest, we've split the town into 4 quadrants, and we're going quadrant by quadrant, street by street, house by house, killing the rats, making sure that we've got them in the Burrows, we've gotten them in the downtown area, so on and so forth. And in doing that, we have seen, this year has been the lightest load of rats that we've ever had to deal with, and right now we're cleaning up that population boom that we see in September, so sort of our peak season. We're cleaning that up before winter so that we don't have to do this in the cold, because I don't like the cold, and I don't want to be out in the middle of winter trying to trap a rat, cleaning up little frozen rat corpses. I'd much rather do it right now and get them in the burrows when I can see the burrows, because I can't see them under all that snow that we get. Any other questions? Again, there's nothing taboo. Yes?
Question one is, if they die in the winter, they're not that burrow, they go back to that same one in the springtime.
Absolutely.
Two is if there's only one hole that you go open, maybe it's the dry ice.
Usually not. So there's exceptions to that though. If the hole is going near something that's hollow, like a porch or your concrete steps, you can't do the dry ice and you can't do the smoke bombs, because what happens is you access that one hole, the main entrance and exit. You've got 2 exit holes here, so if you're using smoke, they just run out those exit holes. If you're using dry ice, it gets down there, they start feeling a little bit weird, and they go out those exit holes. So it's only effective when you have access to all of the holes. In that case, I tend to trap. So yeah, if I see one hole and I know that there's other holes likely underneath something that I can't access, I look for the trail. And usually you can see it, especially by porches that have like a dirt perimeter around it. They'll beat down a little rat path. So if you see that little beaten down path, you know where they're walking. So I take an arm's length away, set my traps, and end up with a bunch of dead rats. Anything else? Anybody?
You have like a card with your number?
I don't, but I can give you my cell phone number.